Our commencement speaker this year exemplifies in his work outstanding creativity and leadership, thereby being a model for the world in which we live. Kathleen Hannon Aikenhead will now introduce our commencement speaker.
Born in Brooklyn, New York, Ken Burns graduated from Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts in 1975 and has become one of the most influential filmmakers of our time. He has received 12 Emmy Awards, 2 Oscar nominations, 2 Grammy Awards, a Peabody Award, and the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Lifetime Achievement Award, among dozens of other honors. Since the Academy Award nominated Brooklyn Bridge in 1981, Mr. Burns has directed and produced some of the most acclaimed historical documentaries ever made, among them Prohibition, Jazz, Baseball, the War, and the National Parks' America's Best Idea. His landmark series is The Civil War, for which he was the director, producer, co-writer, chief cinematographer, music director, and executive producer. This film was the highest rated series in the history of American public television and attracted an audience of 40 million people during its premiere in 1990. It has been noted as one of the most significant documentaries of our time. Graduates, families, and friends, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our commencement speaker, Ken Burns.
Thank you. My goodness, what a generous introduction. You know, I live in a tiny village in New Hampshire, and there's fewer people than are in this front section. And I have on my refrigerator an old and now faded New Yorker cartoon that shows 2 men standing in hell, the flames licking up around them, and one guy says to the other, "Apparently my over 200 screen credits didn't mean a damn thing." And of course it doesn't, but I thank you nonetheless for that generous introduction. President Burcham, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, Aikenhead, Chief Academic Officer, Helligy, trustees, regents, distinguished faculty and staff, proud and relieved parents, calm and serene grandparents, distracted but secretly pleased siblings, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, graduating seniors, good morning. I am deeply honored that you have asked me to say a few words at this momentous occasion, that you might find what I have to say worthy of your intention on such an important day. I am also hopeful that I will be returning here to this beautiful campus to work with your School of Film and Television in the very near future. I now have had some experience with this giving of commencement speeches, but I will always remember with a certain amount of dread the first one I gave 25 years ago this week. As I was preparing my remarks a few days before the ceremonies, an official of the college accidentally let slip, rather cruelly I thought, that I was their third choice for a speaker. I was, of course, devastated. Who were the other 2, I asked, swallowing hard. Woody Allen and Roger Clemens, the man said. I thought about this for some time and then later assured my undoubtedly despairing audience that they had nothing to worry about, that in fact I possessed the blinding fastball of Woody Allen and the existential angst of Roger Clemens. Although these days Roger Clemens is clearly in touch with some existential angst. I am in the business of history. It is the avocation I have chosen to practice my craft of filmmaking. Over the many years of practicing, I have come to the realization that history is not a fixed thing, a collection of precise dates, facts, and events that add up to a quantifiable, certain, confidently known truth. It is an inscrutable and mysterious and malleable thing. Each generation rediscovers and re-examines that part of its past that gives its present, and most importantly, its future, new meanings and new possibilities. I am interested in that mysterious power of history, and I am interested in its many varied voices, not just the voices of the old top-down version of our past, which would try to convince us that American history is only the story of great men, capital G, capital M, and certainly not just those pessimistic voices that have recently entered our studies, voices which seem to suggest that our history, our American history, is merely a catalog of white European crimes. I am interested in listening to the voices of a true, honest, complicated past that is unafraid of controversy and tragedy, but equally drawn to those voices, those stories and moments that suggest an abiding faith in the human spirit, and particularly the unique role this remarkable and sometimes also dysfunctional republic seems to play in the positive progress of mankind. That quite simply has been my creed, my mantra, the lens through which I have tried to see our shared past, to understand its histories for more than 35 years. You know, I have to admit that in many ways I've made the same film over and over again. Each production asks one deceptively simple question: who are we? Who are we? That is to say, who are we Americans as a people? What does an investigation of the past tell us about who we were, what we have become, and perhaps most important, where we are going? Each film offers an opportunity to pursue this question, and while never answering it fully, of course, nevertheless deepens the question with each succeeding project. Deepens the question: who are we? You know, American history is a loud, raucous, moving, exquisite collection of noises that in the aggregate combine to make the sweetest kind of music I know. And we've tried to listen to this music as much as we can in putting together the films we have made. It is a kind of emotional archaeology that we are attempting, listening to the ghosts and echoes of an almost inexpressibly wise past that paradoxically, in the end, point us confidently towards those future horizons that will comprise our fate as individuals, communities, colleges, and of course, a country. It may seem paradoxical as you stand looking forward toward an unknown future today, that history might be, for all of you, an important ally and guide in the years to come, that it might offer you choices and exemplars that will help you negotiate the difficult passage you are now committed to, poised as you are to start a new and challenging chapter in your own life's history. But it is so. History, I have learned over the last 35 years of practice, is the greatest teacher there is. The question becomes for you then, this new next generation, what will you choose as your guiding light? Which distant past events or individuals will provide you with the greatest help, the most comforting solace, the best examples of wisdom and leadership? As the echoes of this expressibly, unexpressibly wise past reverberate in your own lives, what warnings will you heal? What strength will you gather to slay the dragons of despair and disappointment that will inevitably invade even the most cheerful and controlled and controlling among us? The superb preparation this extraordinary school has given you, the friendships and trusts you have built here, the knowledge, and most importantly, the ability to synthesize that knowledge into real understanding you have gained here, the memories that have accrued here almost imperceptibly, like the layers of a pearl, will stay with you for the rest of your lives, influencing all that you will become. And soon all of this will be history for you. And it will be important for each of you here to have a place in your minds and in your hearts to keep this history alive and useful. So this morning, I would like to talk very briefly about history and memory and responsibility. And despite my seeming professional reliance on images and pictures, I am, like most of you, in the business of words and stories. So permit me a few minutes to tell you with some words something that might have some meaning, that might have some relevance for you this very special day. Listen, listen. Early in 1861, at his first inauguration, on a cold and blustery March day in Washington, D.C., when he still hoped somehow to keep his country together, our 16th President, Abraham Lincoln, implored the mostly Southerners in his audience not to go to war. "We must not be enemies," he pleaded. "We must be friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection." But then this remarkable poet-president, the best we have ever had, I believe, went on in a final sentence, so magnificently constructed, so eloquently structured, that it comes down to us as one of the greatest sentences ever written in our English language, a sentence that speaks to us today of themes that go way beyond the tragedy that was about to befall Lincoln's country, a tragedy even these stunning words of his could not stop. A tragedy, I am sorry to say, that we are not completely free of today. A tragedy that can and will repeat itself if we, you graduating seniors specifically, do not heed its implicit message, its deep and timeless warning. Recalling the glorious and much celebrated revolutionary past those in the South still shared with their northern brethren, Lincoln uttered these now to me immortal last words of his address. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. It is a truly astonishing sentence, the better angels of our nature. I love that, so certain as it is of our essential goodness and the perfectibility of these so obviously flawed creatures who like to call themselves human beings. And the mystic chords of memory, another great phrase, don't you think? Those mystic chords, ladies and gentlemen, were not C-O-R-D-S, chords of some rope that would bind us by force together, but C-H-O-R-D-S, musical chords signifying some celestial harmony that would unite us through all time in common purpose, in common anthem, if you will. Lincoln's optimistic words resonate with us today precisely because they are so forward-looking, so positive in the face of the harsh realities of human existence, the collective cruelties we have visited on each other across the time and space of our shared past. He offers a vision, an utterly American vision, I think, that confidently swims upstream against the currents and treacherous undertows in the stream of human history. And yet buried in his inspiring words is an essential worry, that we human beings too often stray from our pursuit of happiness in the way Thomas Jefferson meant it, and pursue instead baser, cruder instincts. It is interesting to note that we come back in times of national trouble and agony again and again and again to Abraham Lincoln for the kind of sustaining vision of why we Americans still agree to cohere, why unlike any other country on earth, we are still stitched together by words, and most important, their dangerous progeny, ideas. We return to him and to our shared past for a reminder, a sense of unity, conscience, and great national purpose. But alas, today we find ourselves in the midst of a new, subtler, perhaps more dangerous crisis than Abraham Lincoln faced, where the rules have changed and they don't always favor the truthful and the virtuous. The reaction, for example, to September 11th, which sponsored so much unity and renewal of that national purpose in its immediate aftermath, has now ironically metastasized into an angrier, more divided posture where we emphasize what differentiates us from the other rather than what we share in common, where suspicion rather than trust is inculcated in us all, where we retreat behind false ramparts of mindless consumerism to ward off a stultifying loneliness brought on by that very same retreat from each other. We are now so dialectically preoccupied with labeling the other, rich, poor, young, old, black, white, gay, straight, north, south, east, west, red state, blue state. We are lost. The great jurist Learned Hand, and could there be a better name for a judge than Learned Hand, once said that liberty is never being too sure you're right. But somehow we have replaced our usual and healthy doubt with an arrogance and belligerence that resembles more the ancient and now fallen empires of our history books than a modern, compassionate democracy. We've started wars instead of finishing them, depended on censorship and intimidation to infringe on the most basic liberties that have heroically defined and described our trajectory as a nation of free people, reduced the complexity of modern life into facile judgments of good and evil, and now find ourselves brought up short when we see that we too, sometimes, in moments, have become what we despise. It is into that world that you now plummet, unprotected from the shelter of family and school, but drafted nonetheless into a new Union Army that must be committed to preserving the values, the sense of humor, the sense of cohesion that have long been our hallmark and beacon. You have no choice. You've been called up, and it is your difficult but great and challenging responsibility to help reverse this alarming tide and set us right again. In short, you've been drafted to help clean up this mess. You can't gradually adapt to this new expediency. You've actually got to change the world. You're joining an army that must be dedicated above all else, career and personal advancement, to the preservation of this country's most enduring ideals. You have to learn and then reteach the rest of us the value of shared sacrifice. Thankfully, you will become a vanguard against this new separatism that has infected our ranks, a vanguard against those who, in the name of our great democracy, have somehow managed to diminish it. Let me speak directly to the graduating class. As you pursue your goals in life, that is your future, pursue your past as well. Let it be your guide. Insist on having a past, and then you will have a future. Keep involved with your school. It needs your attention as well as your money to keep this great machine perpetually in motion. I hear a second. Do not descend too deeply into specialism in your work. Educate all your parts. You will be healthier, I promise. Replace cynicism with its old-fashioned antidote, skepticism. Don't confuse success with excellence. The poet Robert Penn Warren once warned me that careerism is death. Give up addictions and habits. Try brushing your teeth tonight with the other hand. Try even remembering what I just asked of you. Insist on heroes and be one. Read. Read. The book is still the greatest man-made machine of all. Not the car, not the TV, not the computer, not the smartphone. The book. Serve your country. Insist that we fight the right wars. Convince your government that the real threat always comes from within this favored land. Governments always forget that. Do not let your government outsource honesty, transparency, or candor. Do not let your government outsource democracy. When Franklin Roosevelt was speaking at his renomination for President of the United States in the summer of 1936 to run for a second term, he said, "Better the occasional faults of a government that lives in a spirit of charity than the consistent omissions of a government frozen in the ice of its own indifference." Do not let that happen, please. Insist that we support the sciences and the arts, especially the arts. They have nothing. Those are obviously the scientists. Oh, there they are. So far apart and so together. Especially the arts. You know, they have nothing to do with the actual defense of our country. They just make the country worth defending. As a free spirit, do only as Emerson suggested, whatever inly rejoices. Do not lose your enthusiasm. In its Greek etymology, the word enthusiasm means simply God in us. So we come to an end today, and for you also a beginning. Godspeed to you all. Thank you.